But I don't want to just say like within Indigenous communities, although I think that it feels like that so much for me. It that that there has to be sort of a reciprocity. There has to be, it needs to be more of a dialogue
Hmm.
that, um, busting out a bunch of questions in sort of a, I'm going to ask you questions and I'm going to sit here silently listening to your answers. And I'm not going to, really participate in a conversation. It, it doesn't really make sense. Um, And I found myself, on the film I'm working with on Yurok lands in a similar situation, and I felt it was sort of it was magnified by the fact that I was also in conversation with people I knew, in some cases people who were family,
Hmm.
and so then that felt really artificial to just sort of ask them questions and then sit there silently. You know,
Yeah.
I just I finally told the director that I'm working with, okay, I'm just gonna, we're gonna have conversation, and it's gonna be your problem
Yeah.
to cut around
Yeah.
it. You make it work. I'm gonna do
Fair
what I
enough.
do, and you do what you do, and
Yeah.
we'll get this done. But
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense for me to pretend like I don't know things and ask some kind of convoluted question and try to stop them and say, okay, can you say that again but this time without pronouns? Um, you know, use proper words and everything that you're
Yeah.
saying. Y- and so the storyteller and the story listener need to be present together
Hmm.
and in conversation
Yeah.
in those spaces. And I think that, I mean, it sounds like to me that you experienced that.
Yeah. And well, what you made me think of was, yeah, both need to be present with each other, but that doesn't necessarily mean that my voice has to be in the film
Of
or your,
course,
there's
of
ways
course,
we have the
we
technology.
have tools.
Yeah. And I remember us, Christian, when he first started seeing some of these scenes, he kind of asked me like, what do you want me to do with this? And, I basically just said, we just got to let these things play out and we'll cut them up. But, this is how they're going to be. This is how else we're going to let her run the show when it comes to us bringing the camera there. And and Christian's an incredible editor. And often he'd kind of ask me for some specific things like, oh, it'd be great if we could have some of these things, like if they could phrase this more clearly. And I agree. When you're in the edit room, you kind of want that clarity. You
Sure.
want closure when you can get it. Um, but you make sacrifices sometimes when you compromise with your subjects and kind of give them more power in the situation. It's
Well, I
easy to be
think,
controlling as a director.
yeah, well, I think that in this way, you're co-creating this story, and in a way, then these young people are, and I hesitate to refer to them as subjects. That it's maybe better to refer to them as participants.
Participants. Yeah, excellent.
They're participating in creating their own stories, and you're, giving them the opportunity to do so.
Hmm.
You know, um, and teenagers, young people don't often get the opportunity to share their own stories.
Hmm.
How would they have the opportunity to do that? Um, it's not like they own a bunch of lenses and
Hmm.
editing facilities and, you know, even, take away the fact that they're res kids or that they're, in this super remote location. Um, you know, think, the fact that they're young people
Hmm.
and they don't have access to that technology to be able to tell the story of what is life like for them right now as teenagers.
Yeah.
They just don't get to tell that story
Yeah.
because unless somebody says, hey, yeah, let's collaborate in a way
Hmm.
on telling this story. But you have to have the courage to do that.
Yeah. I think more than ever most people have phones and we have tools, and a lot of people kind of tout like, hey, you can make a movie because you have all the power in your pocket, in your phone. And I think, yeah, that's true to an extent. But after having shared the film with our participants, maybe the common sentiment was this idea that they weren't, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. They wouldn't have seen how universal and interesting their stories were on their own in a vacuum, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And I'm not trying to take credit for that, saying that I could see that they're more interesting than they see themselves. But in a way, I think
right,
as a filmmaker coming in and seeing something in them that maybe at the moment they weren't seeing in themselves did empower them in a way. And that is something that we can do as filmmakers is yeah, I should figure out how I want to say that, but
well,
it's a little convoluted.
I get like trying to kind of maintain the humility of that.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to imagine like a group of teenagers sitting around in a high school with their iPhones and their GarageBand software,
right. Yeah,
putting together a documentary about their lives, and like bing bang boom, they're at full frame showing their movie to the world. Like that's not how
right.
The world isn't set up for young people to
No.
share their stories like that.
Right. And what aspects of their stories, I mean, where do you start when you're going to tell a film about yourself? I think that's another reason why having a collaborator come from the outside can be helpful in a sense. But yeah, I mean, yeah, we may have the technology, but it doesn't mean that it's any easier than it's ever been to tell our stories, our own stories. For instance, Granite, well, all of them really made comments like, I loved learning more about Noah. I've always liked Noah, but man, he's really interesting,
Right.
And I'm like, well, so are you. Because Noah told me he loved your part of the film. He loved learning more about you. And I think there was like a little bit of realization, like, wow, yeah, I am really interesting. And I loved seeing that because that's sort of what I was hoping to communicate to them from the beginning is, I'm not doing you a favor. You're doing me a favor. You are sharing some of you with us. And that's what is so special. Like, yeah, your stories really are powerful. You just don't know it yet. But I'm trying to say this in a humble way.
Right.
I don't have a special skill for this or anything. So I think that the outside perspective sometimes can help in that way. Even if the outside perspective is coming from your own family, like in your case, you might, as you're talking to your own family members with your current project, you might know ways to frame some of their experiences that amplifies them.
Right. Well, and that's probably true for all of us, that we don't know how interesting or remarkable we are. That we're going about our daily lives thinking this is all ho-hum.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's something that I just love, that my ideal film is exalting the everyday in a way, and like looking at the banal in some things and seeing the beauty in that. Like, it's hard for me to get behind a film, and no offense, I'm not trying to throw shade at him, but like to get behind a film that is tracking Taylor Swift or something. No offense to her, but like,
yeah. There's some like daily banality to her life.
Yeah, and if that would be the movie I'd want to see, like the really boring parts of being a superstar. That sounds great, but like the concerts and all the really flashy, glitzy things, there's so much of that. I don't think we champion the little things enough. And that, yeah. So I'm starting to ramble now, but that's something that I like to do in my work, is really be able to just spend time with those things that we might take for granted, or that just seem so absolutely ordinary, but in the right framing, they seem profound.
Yeah, years ago I was at the Alamo Museum,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a display of keys.
Keys.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I thought, at the time that these keys were made, nobody thought like, oh, these are going to be on display sometime. People are going to like stand and like look at these keys.
Yeah.
So sometimes I look at the items like that I carry on a regular basis, maybe my credit cards or whatever that I'm getting rid, that would get to get rid of when they're expired or whatever, and think, someday maybe someone's going to want to put these on display, that those everyday items are going to be, someone's going to want to stop and say, oh my gosh, look at those. Like, look at that,
Yeah.
that those are going to be the interesting things,
Mm-hmm.
that people are going to treasure.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what was school like for you?
Right.
What did you study? What was it like to pick apricots?
Mm-hmm.
What was it like to butcher a sheep? What kind of car did you drive? All those like little particulars that we don't notice about our own lives because we're in the middle of living them.
Mm-hmm.
Later, our children or our grandchildren are really interested in them, in those things, and maybe we don't have that documented. We don't have photos of them, or we don't we don't have those around anymore. And we wish that we did, or somebody in our lives wishes that we did,
Yeah.
because that turns out to be some of the interesting the interesting things about us.
Yeah.